morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. So, did anything else happen yesterday besides that Star Wars casting announcement? Not really. It was such a big story, it just overtook the media entirely, not only within the industry, but also, general pop culture media as well. In fact, it was such a big deal, I made an entire special report late yesterday afternoon, which you can check out via the link in the video description if you'd like my thoughts on the 7 new cast members that were officially announced. Apparently, we're waiting on an 8th, another female cast member, and that's kind of a bummer because, as I said in my special report, I liked having the cast announced in one fell swoop, but perhaps because the Oscar Isaac news and the John Boyega and John Driver news had basically broken the day before, Disney Lucasfilm was like, we just better get out ahead of this because everybody kind of knows and we don't want anything else to leak, so we don't have any surprises. Also, though, some of you pointed out that perhaps Disney Star Wars, Disney Lucasfilm, that conglomerate, what is not Disney these days? Well, apparently, still DC Comics is another entity. And some of you say that Disney might have been very shrewd in really squashing the Justice League news. Maybe they saw that story getting traction on Monday and said, no, we dominate when it comes to movie news. We certainly paid to dominate, and let us use our vast resources. No one has a greater weapons cache than the Disney studio. All right, so what can we talk about today? Well, I did find 2 stories that we can discuss that I both think are very interesting, one particularly involving Jeffrey Katzenberg. But then there's also, first, I want to address a little bit of an older bit of movie news that one of you asked me for my thoughts on, and that's Sarah Acosta. BTT viewer Sarah Acosta wrote me a very nice email. She said, Grace, could you please discuss the Barbie movie? Just like they're making apparently an Archie movie that was, announced a little bit ago, but we still haven't seen that come to fruition. So these announcements sometimes can be a little premature. But anyway, Sony has struck a deal with Mattel to make a Barbie film. And the thought process, at least in Hollywood, is that, toys are hot right now. First, of course, you had Transformers and G.I. Joe, the 2 films, so that was Hasbro making some waves. But then I think once the Lego movie hit so big, the rest of Hollywood was like, find me a toy development department. Of course, I recently mentioned they're making a Peeps movie. Everybody wants a piece of this action. Pun accidentally intended there for Legos, the piece de resistance, one of the greatest puns, I think, in movie history. I thought the Lego movie was brilliant, and I think that every other studio is kidding themselves if they think it's just that easy to make a toy movie that can have a great narrative like the Lego movie does, be self-referential and funny but clever at the same time, but also really speak to what the toy stands for. I think that, I wouldn't put it past Hollywood to totally miss the point and the strength of the Lego movie, and that it perfectly captures the meaning of Legos, what their purpose is, and what they provide to both children and adults. Really a beautiful film. Spectacular film. I think even the Warner Brothers should be concerned about trying to duplicate its success, and I hope they have good talent on that sequel. As we've discussed, they've swapped it out. But back to the Barbie movie. So anyway, the Barbie movie, when this news came out, it was a bit of a lightning rod. Just like The Other Woman was a big thing where everybody was very upset that it didn't pass the Bechdel test and that it was not female empowering. A lot of feminists came out against this Barbie movie right away with a lot of snarky comments about how Barbie isn't a realistic depiction of women. This has been an attack on the Barbie brand for quite some time, and actually I believe has hurt the Barbie brand. I think the Barbie brand is fantasy. I've never had a problem with Barbie. When I was growing up, I loved Barbies. My sister and I had an extensive Barbie collection. And our Barbies, they kind of did a little bit what Mattel suggested, but for the most part, they were adventurers. We packed them backpacks and had them go on expeditions. But they also had kind of Sex in the City type adventures. Very G versions, obviously. But, I think Barbie is great because she allows young girls to be explore their fashion, forward side, be very girly, but at the same time have goals and careers. I don't know so much today. One of the things that bothers me about Barbie these days is that, she's a little bit not as aggressive in terms of her career choices as I'd like her to be, and I kind of get upset that they, really dumb down the terms of their jobs whenever sometimes I still like to go check out the Barbie section at Toys R Us when I'm in there and see what she's up to, and I'm like, it's not a baby doctor, it's a pediatrician, or etc. So I just feel they should use the correct term. But anyway, I do have some problems with Barbie, but I feel that Barbie has just become a little gun shy because of all the attacks that she's weathered. And of course, the other brands came in. I don't know how anyone can complain about Barbie and not Bratz, when the Bratz dolls are incredibly disproportionate to reality in many ways. So nobody has eyes that look like that or a head that's that big. So I was disappointed to see this continue to haunt Barbie with the announcement of a movie. Now, that said, so what's this movie going to be? I mean, it's a very difficult scenario. As I said, Barbie spans a very wide area of dreams. You know, she's the fashion model, but she's also, hopefully, the very brilliant doctor. So with the current trend of like bridesmaids and such, you have a situation where who do you appeal to? Do you appeal to the young girl who has no pessimism yet? She's totally optimistic. I actually made a video once called, Barbie. I was like a Barbie dream house, and it's like, if you can't cry, if you can't squeeze out any tears, ask mom to do so. So I guess I do have some little Barbie issues. But the question is, do you have just a totally optimistic, childlike view of Barbie, or do you have maybe the more sarcastic, realistic love-hate relationship that I think some adults do. And I think that could be very interesting, if they were to address that. Look at the success that Pixar has had with their Barbie and Ken. Not actually so much Barbie. I don't think they really did a lot with Barbie. Maybe Mattel was like, leave Barbie alone. But the liberties they were allowed to take with Ken, I thought were fantastic. I love the way Ken was portrayed in Toy Story 3. There were some fabulous jokes. That high heel astronaut joke was just phenomenal. And kudos to Michael Keaton for doing such a good job with realizing that character. And that was a very I think that was kind of Lego-style humor, where it really was aware of what Ken meant and where Ken succeeded and where Ken failed. And I thought that was great. I mean, my Barbies never dated Ken. They would date male dolls from other lines, because Ken's always not been the greatest. All right, so anyway, for this movie, what will the movie be? Well, it's been dreamed up by a Sex and the City writer, a writer-producer, but not from the movies, from the TV show. And I think that kind of reveals itself in the pitch, which to me seems episodic. It doesn't seem like a movie. Sony is intending it to be episodic, but in terms of multiple movies. It'll be a franchise. So basically, they're describing their Barbie as a Mary Poppins type figure who walks into various different people's lives, and because Barbie can do anything, she fixes their lives for them. She comes in, makes everything great, and then leaves. And apparently, so that the idea there is that Barbie, Ken, and Barbie's best friend will all be of a younger demographic, although Barbie always looks like an adult. I mean, Skipper is the kid, so you would have to cast someone who I think fully looks like an adult. So we don't want like a tween Barbie. But anyway, they're going to cast that as an ongoing role. But then the idea is that because Barbie always helps different people, you can bring in a movie star, bigger star names with maybe broader appeal. I'm assuming they want an unknown for Barbie to come in there and do one movie, be fixed by Barbie, and then say, oh, that was fun being in the Barbie franchise for a moment. I don't know what actor will be the one brave enough to do the first one, but so that's their plan. Now, I see some problems here. I don't like the Barbie is secondary to her own film franchise. I think that's really a mistake. I think Sony's not realizing that that's going to come and get them as well. But then also, I think this might suffer a little bit from the Megan Draper complex on Mad Men. And I don't know how many of you watch Mad Men, but a big problem the fan base has had. I was a little late to this problem, but I do certainly recognize that it exists. I think it did become a problem for the show. And some people credit it with the lack of viewership this final season. And that's it. A lot of people said Mad Men became the Megan show. And basically, Don Draper married not only did Megan, his secretary, land Don Draper, but then it became a situation where Megan could do everything. Megan couldn't fail in any area. And Megan not only was great at everything, but Megan never struggled. Everything came easily to Megan. It was just like her life was like a dream. And that's not how life works for anyone. You might have luck sometimes, but then you can bet that someone comes and smacks you in the face just a few moments later. Life is hard. And to kind of perpetrate this myth that Megan's just so special and so beautiful that everything just comes to her right away is unrealistic and frustrating and makes her unlikable, at the very least to women, because any woman will tell you that's some lie that was fabricated like back around when Megan Draper, I guess, lived in the 50s and 60s. But Mad Men's appeal has always been it's peeled back the fakeness of that generation, of that era, and shown what things were actually like. I mean, a lot of the things that we think were the norm in the 50s and 60s were actually just sold to us by Hollywood and Madison Avenue, the ad agencies. They didn't even exist back then. That's what makes Mad Men so fascinating, but Megan is the one glaring part of that show that doesn't adhere to that. It makes you think that that's what life was actually like. And so I can see Barbie going into that territory. It's very hard to make a character likable if they have no hardships or problems. So if no one can relate to Barbie, how is she going to hold up an entire franchise? So I guess make no mistake about this, Sarah. My situation is I feel this is such a tricky movie to pull off. I don't even know if Mattel and Sony can do it. I think that Barbie is as I said, a lightning rod for controversy. And I think that I don't know if you can make her appeal to both kids and adults at the same time. But I don't know how much money is in a Barbie movie. Because one of my notes here was that Lego, Transformers, and G.I. Joe are all toys for boys. And we have yet to see a really popular female toy make it big in Hollywood as a film adaptation. That I can think of, at least off the top of my head. So that's another issue. How are you going to get any men to see this movie without feeling they're being tortured? I mean, a lot of guys went to see Frozen, Hunger Games Catching Fire, those had, action elements. Disney animation, of course, is a big thing. But I'm not quite sure how to do a Barbie movie. So what do you guys think? Do you think Sony has cracked it? Do you like their idea? Or are you like, I just don't think it can be done, or at least, I don't like this idea. And if you have your own idea for a Barbie movie, please pitch it down below. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Thank you so much for emailing me, Sarah. I hope you enjoyed my answer to your question. All right, so the second story is about Ubisoft. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. As many of you know, I'm not a gamer, but we're all going to start to become a lot more familiar with these properties because the video game adaptation era in Hollywood is coming. Yes, it's still coming. It's taking its time getting here. Warcraft is pretty far away. It had to move, I think because of Star Wars, right? It didn't want to have to go up against that in December, so I believe it pushed itself to 2016. But video game movies, they're trying to be the next big thing. I mean, it's always been a big problem in Hollywood. I think Resident Evil to date is the most successful adaptation, and a lot of gamers are unhappy with the quality of that adaptation. Also, it was just announced that Halo is finally going forward as Xbox exclusive content. So it's interesting to see how that will work out. In a case where a video game company is making their own version. They wanted to make their own movie over at Microsoft, but couldn't reach a deal with Hollywood. So that never worked out. But Ubisoft is actually doing quite well in Hollywood. And they have 2 films that are moving forward. Now, of course, the first is Splinter Cell. We've discussed that before. Tom Hardy is going to star, and Doug Liman from the first Bourne film, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, he's going to direct. So I think that could be pretty interesting. And I think Tom Hardy certainly could use some more of these big picture movies. So and they're all so far away. I'm glad he's keeping himself busy until then. I hope he doesn't hurt his career too much until then. We've had some arguments about that with Locke, or I guess a spirited disagreement, but we'll see. I mean, it just takes one movie to turn things around, but it's, let's go look at his counterpart, Michael Fassbender, who I feel is making movies now, and things are just going much smoother for him. So Fassbender, of course, he's Magneto, but yet he still keeps his artistic street cred by making films like 12 Years a Slave that get him an Oscar nomination. Tom Hardy, meanwhile, not had an Oscar nomination yet, or a Golden Globe nomination. But Michael Fassbender also was Golden Globe nominated for Shame, and the Academy kind of snubbed him when they didn't nominate him for that as well. But he's doing very well in both camps. So you have to give credit to Fassbender for his strategy. I think he's very smart. But he's also planning to make Assassin's Creed, which I think is a great choice for him because it's a bartender turned assassin with a history kind of angle to it. I think that sounds like perfect Michael Fassbender. If you told me he's an assassin and an assassin bartender, I'd be like, he is. So basically the setup is for non-gamers, and gamers, correct me if I get this wrong, but my takeaway is that it's like Rogue meets Quantum Leap. Whereas this bartender finds out that he comes from a long line of assassins, or he knew it and he was trying to escape it, but he gets pulled back in. And he can basically jump back in time to his ancestors when they were in these great historical battles and carry out one of their missions, but then when he comes back to his original body, he retains not only their assassin skills, their unique skills as an assassin, but also some of their memories and personality. So you kind of have like a sci-fi angle there, but also a historical aspect. And as a big history fan, that sounds kind of cool to me, actually. But I guess it's like something where, like, I think also in Quantum Leap, as I recall, I never watched that show. But, I guess when he looks in a mirror, he sees himself because, he's wearing this crazy outfit that I think in the Revolutionary War, they'd be like, who's that guy? But I guess when other people see him at that time, he looks like himself. But anyway, Michael Fassbender is going to basically jump through time and kill people. So interesting choice. But the director, this speaks to another Hollywood common mistake, in my opinion, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But they signed a director for, basically the news story is they signed a director for Assassin's Creed. And it's Justin Kurzel. He's an Australian director. He made a film called Snowtown. That was his first feature. It was about a true crime story about some murders dealing with homophobia in Australia that took place. Very, very well received, and it got him a gig here in Hollywood directing Macbeth with Fassbender and also Marion Cotillard. So I guess Fassbender really liked working with this guy and was like, hey, Kurzel, come join me on Assassin's Creed. And the studio, Ubisoft and the group they're working with say, okay, come on aboard, Justin. If Fassbender likes you, let's do it. Or as people like to call him, I believe I've been reading Fassy. But anyway, I kind of don't understand why Hollywood continues to do this. You're taking someone, Justin Kurzel, who has no experience in the action genre, and giving him a big property like this. I mean, let's look at Doug Liman, who has a lot of experience and is coming off of The Edge of Tomorrow as well, going into Splinter Cell. And also he's done the first Bourne movie. Great correlation to Splinter Cell. Great planning, great first gig. Or pre-gig, because it wasn't Doug Liman's first gig. But then you have Kurzel come in here, and he's going to have to be learning on the job, which is always very scary. Now, of course, I've been praising the Russo brothers coming off of You, Me, and Dupree, and Welcome to Collinwood, and doing such a phenomenal job on Captain America the Winter Soldier, so I guess it can be done. But I guess it also relies on if Kurzel will have the kind of support the Russo brothers did. I was talking with somebody about the Russo brothers the other day, and we came to the conclusion that, perhaps their second unit was very well experienced. They had a great second unit director who could handle a lot of those action sequences and good DP, etc. So that's something I think that Brad Bird had on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which is why he was able to make the leap from animation to live action. But Andrew Bird, when he made John Carter, he brought over all his animation people, so he had no one to help him. So if they surround Kurzel with a lot of experienced professionals in these kind of films, great. And then maybe Kurzel can bring whatever he's brought to Snowtown and obviously Macbeth to Assassin's Creed. But I feel, it's iffy, and it's a risky move. I hope the budget on Assassin's Creed is very low. So I'm curious what you think of these video game movies. Do you think that Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed are good ones to first come out of the gate, along with Warcraft, or do you think these aren't the games that are going to sell the mainstream on the video game adaptation? What do you think of Fassbender versus Tom Hardy? They're kind of on the same track, but yet not. And then also, what do you think of using a new director like this, Justin Kurzel? Do you think Assassin's Creed, because it takes place in a historical era, can kind of work off of Kurzel's low-budget background? Or do you think it needs a flashier director? Write your thoughts down below about that as well. All right, so let's move on to the third story. This is about Jeffrey Katzenberg. I really like Jeffrey Katzenberg. I think he's a very, very smart executive. I think my love affair with Jeffrey Katzenberg started when I watched that documentary that I mentioned a few times here, Waking Sleeping Beauty. And I really saw what an influence he had on Disney animation when he was helping usher in the Disney Renaissance and keeping it going. I really love every time he makes a speech to investors or the media. I think he's really on point. And also I really admire the fact that he works, I believe, for $1 as his salary, and then he just takes a percentage of the earnings at DreamWorks Animation, and does quite well for himself. Even when they're not doing so great, which is part of the story today. But I do think, he's a very savvy businessman, and I think he really understands the creative and the business side of Hollywood. He's one of those rare talents, and so, because that's where I like to come from and where I position myself, in my analysis, I just feel Katzenberg and I sometimes are on the same page. I'm like, that guy gets it. He's very smart. And that's why I think to some degree DreamWorks Animation is such a successful company. All right, but it has its speed bumps, which is what we're dealing with right now. Now, DreamWorks Animation was in the news this week because it had to take a big write-off for Mr. Peabody and Sherman. The film just did not succeed. Now, Hollywood Industry Trades and Wall Street, of course, pointed out that 3 of the last 4 DreamWorks Animation movies have not really connected with audiences. So that's Mr. Peabody and Sherman, Turbo, and Rise of the Guardians, all disappointments, while as The Croods was a domestic disappointment but was able to make up its money quite a bit overseas, to the point where they are making a sequel. So I thought it was very interesting what Katzenberg's takeaway is from this. I think he's very much speaking to how Hollywood feels in general these days. And then also he had some very interesting comments about where he thinks movies are going. So I wanted to share those today. However, I would counter, by the way, Katzenberg said the reason that he felt that Mr. Peabody and Sherman didn't do well is because it doesn't have broad enough appeal, global appeal, and that it just it needs more playability. and that he thinks that, it's not competitive enough. It's not just enough, he feels, to make a good movie these days. You need to give people a reason to go to the theater, to pay for a movie theater, price, and for all the food. It's becoming very expensive to go to the movies, and as we've been discussing, Katzenberg is realizing that. Now, I would say that his problem with Mr. Peabody and Sherman, and, as I discussed in my review, was that it was not feature animation quality. He created something that belonged on television, in my opinion. It felt episodic, the jokes, the story structure, everything just wasn't plussed enough. So I think that, his analysis of his own product is flawed because he's not admitting to himself, in my opinion, that the product itself was flawed. He didn't put out a great product that didn't happen to have broad enough appeal. This isn't the head of Leica talking here, and their budgets are much smaller over at Leica, which is why they're able to continue to work, turn a profit. They realize they don't have mass appeal, but the product is done quite well. I think Katzenberg, Mr. Peabody and Sherman just wasn't up to snuff. Now, he's saying he's turning attention not only to things that are very that are big, that need to be seen on the big screen, but also sequels. He said sequels are a big part of DreamWorks animation business. You're seeing Pixar do the same thing. A lot of Hollywood is doing the same thing. And I think they feel that sequels are more exciting to see. They get you more interested to come into the theater because you're already invested in the story. And so that's why I think Hollywood in general is into sequels right now. They said, well, for an original film, you might wait to see how it does. You might, with reviews and box office, you might even wait until it comes out on Netflix or streaming because you don't want to spend your money on something that's an unknown commodity. And then if you like it, you'll go see the sequel in theaters. I think that's kind of the thought process they're thinking of. But I think that when you, but sequels, not all sequels are created equal. I think that it's great when you do something like How to Train Your Dragon that they're doing over at DreamWorks, where you're building a universe, something we've rarely seen in animation sequels. Usually they're just like, oh, isn't this a cute, we're going to follow this storyline now. We're talking about world building on the level of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars, etc. That kind of expansive universe. And so I think that's what's so impressive about How to Train Your Dragon, why so many of us are excited about it. So I think that those kind of sequels are great. But I think, like, for instance, and I liked the last Madagascar, Madagascar 3, the European adventure, it's the circus, whatever. I thought it was fun. I had a good time going. I thought that was a better film actually than these four films that didn't work out were Peabody, Turbo, and Rise of the Guardians. Although I did think all of them had their Turbo wasn't that bad actually, and Rise of the Guardians was pretty good. I think the marketing campaign is what let down Rise of the Guardians. But anyway, Madagascar 3 isn't necessarily a film that people needed to go and see. It didn't build a world. It just was another, fun one-off. And I don't think that's a good use of Hollywood's time. Now, of course, Katzenberg feels their next big film, they have a couple sequels coming, of course, The Penguins of Madagascar. But he's saying he thinks their Boo, the Bureau of Otherworldly Operations, will be kind of like a Ghostbusters type story. He thinks that will do quite well. But I don't know, Katzenberg, are people just going to see it as another R.I.P.D., that Jeff Bridges, Ryan Reynolds movie that did not do well? I think that each property is unique, and I think when Hollywood starts doing this kind of cookie cutter, development decisions is when they really start to get into trouble. And I would caution Katzenberg against doing the same. But you can see he's speaking to the larger trend in Hollywood that, the quality of television and the price of going to the movies is killing the mid-range movie and apparently the original idea. I hope that is not the case. I think if Hollywood were to invest time as well as money into these ideas, things might be turning out better when they hit theaters. All right, so the other thing that he talked about was he's saying that he thinks the model for how we view movies is going to change very soon. I actually am rooting for this because I feel something needs to change because, as I just said, the mid-range movie and the original idea are in danger in Hollywood. So Katzenberg is saying the way he thinks these things are going to evolve is that, right now, you have about it used to be a much longer window between when a movie hit theaters and when you could watch it at home. It's been getting much shorter, and sometimes even today we have day-and-date releases. And I've said that I think some small films would be wise to do that, some bigger property films. Veronica Mars did that, and I felt the recent Jason Bateman film Bad Words would have benefited from a day-and-date release on demand. And it did very poorly at the box office, so anything would have helped it. But Katzenberg is saying that he feels that the window between when you can watch a movie in theaters and at home is going to shorten to the point where it is 17 days, which is essentially 3 weeks. And then he adds a very interesting factoid, and he said that is 95 to 98% of where movies make their money anyway. Now, he's only talking about from a studio's perspective. As we've discussed, It's about 50-50 in the box office split, where the studio gets 50% and the theater gets the other 50%. But that's the way it works. It's a sliding percentage scale. And so by the end of a movie's run, it breaks down to about a 50-50 split. But when a movie first enters theaters, the majority of the gross goes to the studio. And then the movie theater is making its money off of concessions. But the longer the movie plays, the more the percentage shifts in favor of the theater, and that kind of gives the theater incentive to keep the movie playing on the big screen because they're making more and more money off of it. So I think Katzenberg is really not looking out for the theaters there, but I guess Hollywood doesn't do a lot to look out for the theaters anyway. Although the theaters don't do a lot to look out for us, so how can we feel bad for them with their being so dirty these days and poorly maintained and not doing any work just to, reinforce the no talking, no texting policies, with the exception of a few theaters, of course, like the Alamo Drafthouse and the ArcLight. But anyway, he's saying that window will shorten to 17 days. Now, what that will do to movie theaters, who knows? That could really change that business model. So we'll have to see if they'd even agree to that. But Katzenberg says for basically 3 weeks after a movie opens, when the studios have made their money, to hell with the theaters, you'll be able to see the movie anywhere you want. It'll just break out of the box or out of the movie theater. And so basically he's saying you'll be paying for size. That's the way he phrased it. I really like that. So Katzenberg is saying you'll be paying either for a movie ticket or about $15 to see it on a big screen. If you want to see it on a television, people have very big screen TVs these days. It'll cost you, say, $4. But if you're willing to watch it on your phone, they'll only charge you $2. I don't know how they're going to police where you watch your download, because right now downloads are available across the spectrum of devices that you have. That's the convenience that technology is trying to offer right now, and why I think streaming is doing so well. But Katzenberg is saying, I guess maybe it will be the resolution. That's how they'll sell it to you. So if you want to try and blow it up to your big screen, go ahead, but it's going to look like crap. But I'm curious, would you want to maybe try out a movie that you wouldn't really regularly for just $2 on your phone? Although some phones are getting pretty big. Katzenberg should take that into account as well. But do you like the sliding scale of how you pay to see a movie? What do you think of if there's only 3 weeks between when a movie comes out in theaters and when you can see it at home? Would you be even more selective in what you pay to see on the big screen? I mean, and also, at what point is the movies any different than television? I think that it's a very slippery slope, and it's a very tricky area to navigate. But something has to be done because there are problems. So, but anyway, I think Katzenberg is certainly one of the people who understands it best, even though if I don't agree with everything he's saying. And I really do like the way he's phrasing things. All right. So anyway, those are the 3 stories of the day. The viewer question comes from Ryan Francis Hume, and Ryan says, "Hi, Grace. I'm from London, and I enjoy lots of British TV." So do we, Ryan, which is going to actually speak to your question in a moment. So Ryan says, "I enjoy lots of British TV and film. With the Star Wars cast being officially announced and lots of the new cast members being British, do you think U.S. audiences will accept such a strong British influence in this new blockbuster? Harry Potter was very British. However, that is the exception." I don't know how British the new Star Wars cast is, right? I mean, a lot of you said that Donal Gleeson, I mispronounced his name. Thank you so many people for yesterday pointing out to me the correct pronunciation. People were very quick to say he is Irish, so let's make sure we categorize him correctly. Daisy Ridley, obviously, the lone actress who was cast, is from the UK. And then I think that's about, Andy Serkis, I believe, is Australian or New Zealand, right? I don't know if he's a UK, because he's a Peter Jackson friend. So I don't know. It's not particularly British. It's more that they're filming in London. Adam Driver, of course, is, of course, John Boyega is British as well. UK talent there. But I have to tell you, Ryan, I think that some Americans might not admit it, but we really love England. We have quite a love affair with the UK. We love their television shows right now, and we love their talent. Michael Fassbender, I believe he's Irish, right? I'm making sure I get these regions correct. Michael Fassbender is a huge talent right now. James McAvoy. Look at the X-Men cast. You have Hugh Jackman from Australia, and then of course you have Ian McKellen, British. Patrick Stewart, British. Tom Hiddleston, British. Chris Hemsworth, Australian. Basically, the Australia and the UK, that's where Hollywood gets a lot of its talent because, they're English speakers. Margot Robbie, UK. It's just, I think Americans are, really not averse to this, and I think Americans do feel kind of there's some cachet coming from these regions. That it's tremendous schools of drama. You get your cowboys, your Bruce Willises, your Robert Downey Jr.'s from America, your Johnny Depps. But when you want that classically trained actor, you go to the UK or I think to some degree Australia, Kate Blanchett, for instance. And I think that Christopher Nolan is a UK director. I think, and this is something that I've discussed with The Quiet Ones and Jared Harris with my interview with him. This is something that we've been discussing a little bit. I discussed it in Movie Math. That because both Hollywood and British film are English speaking, English language entertainment, they really are melded together. And I think recently the British film industry has been struggling for independence to separate itself from Hollywood and not just be an extension of Hollywood, because so much of their talent comes stateside. And we shoot so many movies over in the UK. I mean, Warner Brothers has a facility there, and there are just a number of really famous studios, and the original Star Wars were shot there as well. Look at James Bond. That's, just like Harry Potter, that's a UK property that Americans just absolutely adore. So I don't think there's any problem, actually, and I think that there's some favoritism towards UK talent. I think that there's just like Americans love a British accent. There's just something about it. Maybe it's because it's where we come from. I mean, I know I certainly warm to it, and I think it's part of our history. And there's just a very good relationship between the United States and the UK, to the point where I think we enjoy the same things, and there's a lot of crossover in our talent. So I guess that the way I would phrase, to answer your question, I don't think that, Ryan, there'll be any backlash at all. I think people are actually relieved to see British talent in play here. Boyega, Gleeson, and that he's from that region, and then Daisy Ridley, because they know that they're going to have quality actors. And so maybe the fact that we should really be asking, Ryan, is why is it more really talented, top-notch talent? Tom Hardy, we just talked about him, UK. Why is it more top-notch talent coming out of the American, acting schools and just in general? Why is it that we feel that the best actors come from, the Lambda, et cetera, the London Academy of Dramatic Arts, et cetera, and those schools. So that's my question. And also, I would also be interested, that's my answer to your question, Ryan, but I'd also be curious to how all of you feel about the separation between the British entertainment industry and the American entertainment industry. Do you like that there's really no clear line between the two? Or do you think that they should, the British film and television departments should work very hard to try and individualize themselves and become their own brand instead of just the classy side of Hollywood? All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you can please write down below what you think of today's 3 top stories and the viewer question, and let me know what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.